Hey besties, welcome back. Today we have a very exciting video. We're going to be going over everything that I read in the month of September, and there's some really great books on this list. So I'm excited to talk about them with you guys. But first, let's get into some stats. So I actually managed to read 10 books this month, which is literally insane for me. But we had 3 lit fic, 3 romance books, 1 fantasy, 1 horror, 1 sci-fi, and 1 thriller. For ratings, I had 4 3 stars, 1 3.5 star, 4 4 stars, and 1 5-star read. I got 3 of these books from Everand. I owned and read my physical copies of 2 of them. I got 4 on Libby and 1 from Audible. I did 7 audiobooks this month, 2 physical books, and 1 hybrid read where I listened and read with my eyes. Every book I read this month was adult, and I read 6 out of the 7 books that I had on my TBR for the month, so I would count that as a success. So without further ado, let's get into everything that I read, and as I said earlier, we're going to rank these from worst to best. No one is as shocked as me that my worst book of the month was The Gate of the Feral Gods by Matt Dinniman, book 4 of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I'm honestly so sad that I have to rank this book so low, and I also have to let you guys know that I have decided to DNF the series after finishing this book. Now, I don't want to misconstrue my enjoyment for this series because I have had a really fun time reading these books. I've really enjoyed a lot about each of these books in this series, but for me, it just gets to a certain point. While I was reading this book, it just felt like I was reading the same thing over and over and over again, and I think I'm just really burnt out on this series. The books are so chaotic and so overloaded with world building and characters and creatures and different vocabulary words, and it's just a lot. And there's really not many moments in this series to just kind of take a step back and breathe. And I feel like that's something that would have really greatly improved my enjoyment of this series, specifically this book. I just found that the level of the dungeon that we were exploring in this book, again, was just a bit too convoluted for me and overly complicated. I don't know if that's just an issue with me personally because I don't read a ton of fantasy and sci-fi, so I have a little bit of a harder time with heavy world building. But I feel like this could just be a genuine issue with this series where Matt Dinniman just goes a little overboard with his concepts, and it probably could be simplified down a bit. And I think that would have made this reading experience a little bit more enjoyable for me. That's not to say that I didn't like this book. There was a lot of stuff that I did enjoy about it, namely the characters. I love Katya, Princess Donut, Carl, Mongo, even Mordecai. I love reading about each of them and their stories and their arcs, but that's just not enough to keep me wanting to push through the rest of this series, unfortunately. Would I recommend that you read this series? I would say yes, it is definitely worth a try, and it's really fun and like a good escapism type of read. I really enjoyed the first 2 books in particular. I probably should have stopped after book 2. Book 3 is where things started to get a little bit iffy for me, but I decided to push on and keep going with book 4. And I just realized while reading this one that I don't think this series is for me, and that's okay. It was still fun to try it out, and I still had a really good time, and I don't regret reading this series. And if I forgot to mention it earlier, I gave this book a 3 stars. It was just okay, but yeah, this will unfortunately be my last book of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. Next up, we have another book that I'm pretty shocked to be rating so low, and that is Monstrilio by Gerardo, Sámano, Córdova. This was a book that I was so excited to read, and I've had my eye on it for years, so I was really excited to finally get around to reading it. I had really high hopes. It is about this woman whose son passes away, and when he dies, she decides to take his lung out of his body and then kind of nurse it back to life until it forms this monster. At its core, this book is really all about love and family and grief and loyalty. It had a lot of amazing commentary, and I really enjoyed the themes that were portrayed throughout this book. However, the writing style is where this really fell flat for me. The writing of this book was just very staccato, if that makes sense. It was a lot of really short, simple sentences with not much extra flourish or emotion. And I was also listening to this on audiobook on Libby, and the audiobook was very monotone. So it just made the entire reading experience kind of monotonous for me. I really enjoyed the story and what was happening, but the writing style just kind of made this a drag for me to read. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. Originally, I had rated it 3.5 stars, but after thinking back on it, my overall feelings toward this book are not overtly positive, so I did decide to lower that down to a 3 star, just because I don't think that this book is really going to stick with me for a long time. time. And when I look back on my time reading it, I remember not really enjoying that experience. But I would still recommend this book, at least to try. This is a really interesting book and it gets a lot of positive feedback. I'm kind of the odd one out here. So I do think a lot of people will really enjoy this. On the cover, it says that this is a modern Frankenstein, and I totally agree with that. So this is actually a great read for spooky season. If you're looking for something to add to your October TBR, this would be a really good one to check out. Okay, next up we have The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood. I did enjoy my time reading this. I mostly read this because the movie is going to be coming out soon and I wanted to read the book first. And as you guys know, I'm also on a journey to finish Hazelwood's backlist. So this was the next one that I decided to check off of my list. And I really enjoyed my time with this book. I gave it a 3 stars. I thought it was pretty good. This is just kind of an average romance. It's not really anything special or crazy, but it was a really fun time to read. This follows Olive, a PhD student at Stanford University, and Adam Carlson, who is a professor at the university. Now, he's not her professor, but he is a professor. So this is kind of like a student-professor relationship. It's also fake dating. And the way that their relationship comes about is honestly pretty outlandish and kind of far-fetched, in my opinion. Hazelwood just has a really distinct writing style, and I always fly through her books. They're super easy to read, and I just really enjoy how she writes her romances. I also love that a lot of her books focus on women in STEM. I feel like she is just such a bright person and an author that I'm definitely happy to support. So I was really happy to read another one of her books. Would I recommend this? Yeah, you're going to want to read this before the movie comes out, which I'm so excited for. Lily Reinhart is going to be the perfect Olive. I cannot wait to see that film. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that you check this out if you're looking for like a sweet, easy, fun romance read. Next up, we have another romance, which is Well, Actually. I just finished reading this book yesterday and I had a really fun time with it. This one is definitely very different from The Love Hypothesis. If you didn't know, this book is loosely based on the chicken shop date between Andrew Garfield and Amelia de Molenberg, which is what sold me on this in the first place and what really made me want to pick this one up. As you can see by the cover, it's definitely giving those vibes, and I do think that this book lived up to that expectation for me. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving this one a 3 stars. I had a couple minor issues with it, but overall, it was a pretty solid romance read. We are following Eva Kitt, and she has a YouTube series called Sausage Talk, which is very similar to Amelia de Molenberg's Chicken Shop Date, where she takes on like B-list celebrities and interviews them while they eat hot dogs. One night she ends up filming and posting a drunken TikTok video where she trashes popular star Riley Cooper and their previous romantic relationship from about a decade ago. And this ends up stirring up a ton of attention all over the internet from Riley Cooper's fans. So in order to capitalize on this moment, she ends up having him on her show as a guest. And from there, their relationship just really takes off. They end up going on a series of dates, all in the name of internet clout, and slowly but surely, real feelings start to get involved. This was a really fun and interesting concept for a romance book, and it was unlike anything that I read before, so I appreciated it for that. I will say our main character, Eva Kitt, can be a little bit insufferable at times. She definitely has some mental health issues and some previous trauma that is definitely having an effect on how she treats the people in her life, especially Riley, which can be a little bit frustrating to read at times. And their relationship definitely had a little tiny bit of toxicity to it, which I personally think I ended up enjoying, but I could see where that would kind of throw some people off. But yeah, I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I definitely wouldn't count it as like a favorite for me. Okay, and next up, we have a book that I was not planning to read this month, but my Libby loan came in for it, and I just had to take advantage of that opportunity, and that is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I have had my eye on this book since it came out. It's been very popular this year. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed my time with it, and it definitely held my attention the entire time that I was listening to the audiobook. This was my first Fredrik Backman book, so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. I've heard that his writing style is very unique, and I can confirm that yes, it is very unique. There was a lot of really beautiful quotes throughout this entire book and a lot of thought-provoking sentences, which I was really enjoying. But I will say the characters felt a little bit like quirky to me. They didn't really feel like real people. The best way I can describe it is this felt like a John Green book for adults. If you've read The Fault in Our Stars, like the teenagers in that book, they just kind of are a little bit uncanny and definitely do not act like a real teenager would act. And that's kind of how I felt reading this book. We have two main characters that we're following throughout this story, a teenager and then kind of an older man. And I feel like both of them were just super quirky, and like the way that they talked and how they interacted with each other at points just didn't really feel believable to me. Like it definitely felt like they were characters and not real people, if that makes any sense. This book all centers around this famous painting and this group of teenagers that was portrayed in the painting. And we're kind of getting this back and forth of this current day teen hearing the story of these four teens in the painting from one of the men that was one of the teenagers in the painting. I feel like I explained that really weird, but hopefully that made sense. But yeah, we're kind of getting this back and forth from past to present, where we're learning about the backstory of this painting and the teens that were involved in making the painting. And then we're also kind of getting this like sweet and tender friendship that's developing between this teenager and this older man. I definitely enjoyed this book, and I would be interested to check out more Fredrik Backman in the future, but I don't foresee him necessarily being like a favorite author for me or an auto-buy author. I guess we'll have to see. Let me know if you guys have read any of his books and which ones you would recommend in the comments, because I think I will test the waters a little bit more with this author. But yeah, this was a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me, a little lower than your average rating for this book. But for me, I just didn't really connect with it in the way that I think a lot of people did. Okay, next up, we have a book that really took me by surprise, and that is Bittersweet by Hattie Williams. This is a book that I had unlocked on Everand, and I heard a few things about it, but not a ton. I feel like not a lot of people have actually read this book, so I was really excited to try it out. I heard that it was really dramatic. It all centered on an affair, and that just really drew me in. I was excited for the drama and the intrigue of it all. I really enjoyed this book. I gave this a 4 stars. This book is all centered on an affair that is happening between our main character, who is a young woman working in the publishing industry, and this older male author that is being published by her publishing company. At the beginning of this book, you definitely get the impression that she has kind of like an unhinged obsession with this man, which definitely sets up a very like unsettling tone right off the bat. And I had no idea how this story was going to unravel and just basically descend into complete and utter chaos. I was really hooked with this audiobook the entire time I was listening to it. The narration was fantastic, and you're just really inside the head of our main character throughout this entire book as she is developing this relationship with this man, and you watch this relationship slowly eat away at her over time and strip her of her friends, her family, her life, any like semblance of self that she had, and you just get to see her mental health completely deteriorate. It gets really dark and honestly kind of heavy. I had to take a break while reading this to watch The Summer I Turned Pretty just for a little bit of levity. I was not expecting this book to get as dark as it did, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like this was such an interesting character study and definitely a really unique book. I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it before. But like I said, just check your trigger warnings first because it is pretty heavy. Next up, we have All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I ended up getting the audiobook for this one off of Libby as well, and I just finished reading this one. This is the third S.A. Cosby book that I have read, and he does not disappoint. Okay, the man does not miss. Something about his writing style is just so addicting and enthralling to read. I just love the way that he crafts a story. His mystery thrillers are always just so unique and unlike anything else that I have read in this genre. I cannot recommend his books highly enough. In this book, we are following Titus, who is a black sheriff in a very small county that has recently been riddled by a slew of crimes that lead to the investigation of a serial killer. And we just follow Titus as he is slowly unearthing this mystery and trying to find out who is responsible for all of these killings. This book was very brutal. S.A. Cosby does not shy away from depicting violence in his books, and it's often done in a very grotesque manner that can be sickening to read, but I feel like that's what makes his books so good. They just feel so tangible, and like you can see everything playing like a movie in your mind. It's incredible. I don't know how he does it. This book was no exception. I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving this a 4 stars, and I would highly recommend that you check it out. All right, we've made it to the top 3. So coming in third place, we have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This was by far the best romance book that I read this month. One of the best romance books I've read all year. I really, really enjoyed this, and Kennedy Ryan's writing style just really spoke to me. This was my first book by her, and I will definitely be picking up more in the future. I'm going to be honest, I was a little apprehensive about this book because of the premise of it. This is a romance book, but it's a second chance romance that takes place between a married couple who has recently been divorced and fallen out of love with each other. They have dealt with some pretty intense grief recently, which has led to the downfall of their relationship. And this book is really them just like finding their way back to each other and rebuilding upon the very strong foundation that they had from their past. I'm not usually a huge fan of second chance romance. It's just not a trope that I typically go for. So I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy this. That and the fact that we are following a previously married couple. They have some teenage children. I just didn't know if this was going to be a romance book that I would enjoy. But I was so wrong because this book was incredible. The characters in this book just felt so real. They had real struggles and their relationship just felt very layered. And I really appreciated how they treated each other and how they communicated with each other. They definitely had their rough patches throughout this book, but at the end of the day, they always treated each other with so much respect and care. And they always came together for their children as a unified front, which I really loved, like how that was portrayed. There's also some great representation for therapy in this book and the benefits of using therapy, which is a great tool that I think everybody can benefit from. So I really liked how that was depicted in this book as well. I also loved the side characters that we got in this book. The banter between Yasmin and her best friends was honestly hilarious and so fun to read. The kids were also really well fleshed out, and I just feel like everything was done so well in this book. So I would highly, highly recommend this book. One of my favorite romances of the year. And like I said, I'm so excited to read more by this author. When I was going through all of the books that I read this month and trying to rank them from worst to best, I was really surprised that I ended up putting Things Left Unsaid by Sara Jafari in second place. This book has just really stuck with me since I read it, and I continue to think about it pretty regularly ever since I finished this book. This is a really short literary fiction book that I picked up at Barnes & Noble just solely based on the cover. I knew nothing about this going into it. It's not very popular. It has very few ratings on Goodreads, and I feel like not enough people know about this book, and I would definitely recommend that more people check it out. This book deserves way more hype than it has. This book follows our main character, Shirin, who is a 26-year-old young woman working in the publishing industry and trying to make a way for herself in the world. One day, she bumps into an old friend from high school named Kian, and the two of them just kind of rekindle their friendship with one another. And this is a really slow-paced, kind of quiet story that will just creep up on you as you continue reading it. This book was a really deep and layered exploration of the effects that racism can have on somebody's mental health over a long period of time. Shirin is from Iran, and so is Kian, and the two of them bond over their shared experiences in childhood of being relentlessly bullied for their race. And now we're following Shirin as an adult as she's experiencing countless microaggressions on a daily basis and constant racism from the publishing company that's supposed to be her dream job and kind of her safe haven. And nobody in her life takes her seriously. They all kind of just brush it under the rug, act like it's not a big deal. But for her, it's a huge deal, and it has had a massive effect on her mental health. And the only person who really understands what she's going through is Kian. So we have this exploration of her relationship with Kian and them just bonding and reconnecting after so many years apart. And then we have that relationship juxtaposed to her relationship with everybody else in her life, and most of them are white. And it's just a really interesting dichotomy. This book is kind of similar to Bittersweet in that you're just so inside the main character's head. It's a very character-driven story, and you are experiencing the mentality of somebody who is dealing with some severe mental health issues. And I just really loved how that was portrayed in this book. I also just love how this author portrayed the effects that racism and bigotry can have on a person. It's really difficult to imagine if you haven't been in that situation. But this book gave me just a little taste of what people of color have to deal with on a daily basis and how exhausting and straining that is. This book also explored just being a woman in a very male-dominated world and how difficult that is. And I could really relate to Sharon's experiences there, and just knowing how hard it is to be a woman in this world and how exhausting that is and how frustrating and how it can just make you so angry at times. I can only imagine dealing with that while also dealing with racism on top of that. I mean, it just really makes you think. This is such a thought-provoking book. I feel like it was beautifully done. I really enjoyed this, and I think everybody should read this. Honestly, it deserves way more hype. This was my second favorite book of the month, and yeah, highly recommend this one. Okay, we finally made it to my favorite book of the month, and this is not only my favorite book of this month, but my favorite book of the entire year so far, and also my only 5-star read from September. And that book is none other than Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. This book was everything to me. I absolutely loved every single second of it. Rebecca Ross just never disappoints. Her writing is so beautiful and lyrical and poetic. I will never pass up an opportunity to read a book by this woman. I just love the way that she writes, and this book was no exception. This is my favorite book of the year so far, my favorite Rebecca Ross book as well. This book beat out Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which was previously my favorite book of the year, and I did not think it would be possible for anything to top it. But wow, this book was just so good, and I absolutely loved every single second of it. This book is a prequel to the Divine Rivals series, and I really don't think it's necessary to read Divine Rivals before you read this, although I still recommend that you read Divine Rivals because that series is amazing as well. But this book is very different from those books, and it will not hinder your reading experience if you have not read Divine Rivals. In this book, we are following our main character, Matilda, who is the herald of the gods. That is her power in this world. She's basically a messenger, and she can travel between all 3 realms to deliver messages to and from the gods. This is not a very threatening power to have in this world, and I found the politics of this world particularly interesting because in this universe that Rebecca Ross has created, there's a lot of competition between the gods, and they can actually kill each other to steal their powers for themselves. So this is actually a pretty dangerous universe to be a god in, and it sets up for some pretty interesting dynamics between the gods, as none of them can really trust each other, and they will betray their closest friends to gain more power. So Matilda, being the herald of the gods, she's not really seen as a big threat, but of course, there is more to her than just that. We also find out that Matilda has been communicating with a mortal boy through dreams, and the two of them eventually meet in person. And this is what really kind of sets off this sprawling, epic story. I'm not going to tell you much more about what this is about than that. I feel like that's really all you need to know. But this book felt like I was watching like 4 seasons of Game of Thrones packed into 500 pages. There was so much that happened. This was such an epic story, and we're following Matilda all the way from childhood into her adulthood. The way that Rebecca Ross does her world building just really works for me as somebody who does not enjoy world building typically, and honestly turns me off from a lot of fantasy books. The way that Rebecca Ross writes it, it just feels so effortless. And usually world building feels like this task or chore that I have to get through to get to the good stuff. But in Rebecca Ross's books, it always just feels like a breeze. And I just really appreciate her for that. This world that she has created is just so fun and interesting. I love the magic system. I loved getting to see this universe from the perspective of the gods. It was a very different take on this world than what we saw in Divine Rivals. This book also takes place a few hundred years before the events of Divine Rivals, so it kind of had like a historical feel to it as well. I just loved everything about this book. I had such an amazing time reading it. I can't wait to reread it. And yeah, this is my favorite book of the entire year so far. 5 stars, obviously. If you're going to read any book from this list, make it this one. This book was incredible. Okay, and these are all of the books that I read in September, ranked from worst to best. Let me know if you've read any of these in the comments below and your thoughts on them. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.